Airline refuses business class to Black CEO, his next move shocks everyone. The soft hum of the airport filled the spacious terminal at JFK, where Marcus Green, a charismatic, sharply dressed black man in his early 40s, stood at the counter of Atlas Skies Airlines. His neatly tailored navy blue suit radiated authority, and his brown leather briefcase hung at his side. He just concluded a series of high-stakes meetings in New York City, securing a multi-million-dollar deal for his growing tech company, Novatech Solutions. The world should have felt at his feet. But not today. "Sir, I'm afraid you can't board with a business class ticket," said the woman at the counter, her tone clipped and dismissive. She glanced at Marcus's ticket, then back at him with a barely veiled look of suspicion. "It appears there's been some kind of issue. You'll need to move to the back of the line and speak with customer service." Marcus raised a brow, confused. He glanced at his ticket again. Business class, clearly printed in bold letters. Paid in full. Not a promotional upgrade, but something he'd purchased outright. "Is there a problem with my ticket?" he asked calmly. "Like I said, sir, there's an issue. We can't seat you in business class at this time." He noticed her eyes flit toward a group of predominantly white passengers, all breezing through without an issue. It wasn't the first time Marcus had experienced a microaggression in his life, but this was beyond subtle. This was deliberate. "May I ask why?" "I paid for this seat, and I'd like to board with the rest of the business class passengers," he said, still keeping his tone professional. The agent pursed her lips. "You'll need to wait, sir." Something inside Marcus clicked. He had built his company from scratch, overcoming countless obstacles, and this wasn't about to be another one that slipped by. He took out his phone and began recording the interaction. "I'll need your name for this video, please," he said. The agent's eyes widened slightly. "You can't record here." "I can and I will," Marcus replied. "Now, please explain why I'm being denied boarding." A few heads began to turn. Passengers were watching now. Realizing she was in a tight spot, the agent shifted her weight uncomfortably. "We've had some internal policies recently. Certain seats are reassigned at the airline's discretion." Marcus paused, studying her. He knew it wasn't about an internal policy. This was profiling, pure and simple. The silence stretched. Finally, he spoke. "All right," he said, putting away his phone. "I'll handle this differently." The agent smirked, as if she'd won some small victory. Marcus smiled back. He was far from defeated. The power move. By the time Marcus reached the airport lounge, he was already on a call with his attorney. A few hours later, after a red-eye flight back home in coach class, he was sitting in his sleek, glass-walled office in San Francisco, formulating a plan. The world needed to know what happened, not just for him, but for anyone who had faced similar discrimination and had been too tired or afraid to fight back. He called his PR team. "We're going public with this," he said. "But not just on social media. We're going to make a difference." Within 24 hours, the story was trending under the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack. Marcus shared the video, detailing his experience. Prominent activists, celebrities, and fellow business leaders amplified his voice, calling for an investigation into Atlas Skies Airlines. The company's first response was a generic apology, but Marcus wasn't satisfied. He demanded real accountability. The next week, Atlas Skies stock plummeted as news outlets picked up the story. Protesters stood outside their corporate headquarters. Customers boycotted the airline, sharing their own stories of discriminatory treatment. And then, Marcus made his biggest move yet. He announced that Novatech Solutions would be launching a travel app for equity and fairness, designed to help travelers share real-time reviews of airlines, highlighting instances of discrimination and celebrating positive experiences. The app would include resources for reporting incidents, offering legal advice, and connecting travelers with support networks. Investors flooded in. The app, called FlightFare, became an overnight sensation. A change in the air. 2 months later, Atlas Skies reached out to Marcus, asking for a meeting. The CEO of the airline, a middle-aged man with graying hair, sat across from him in a sleek conference room in downtown San Francisco. "We'd like to formally apologize and work with you to address systemic issues within our airline," he said. "We've reviewed our policies, and you were right. What happened to you should never have happened to anyone." Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering the offer. He didn't need their apology. He'd already won. His app was changing the industry. But he knew the real goal was to create lasting change. "I'll work with you," Marcus said finally, "but on one condition: you must establish a diversity and equity board, and you will publicly share your progress on addressing these issues." The CEO nodded, humbled. Done. Legacy in the skies. Months later, Atlas Skies had become a model for inclusivity in the airline industry. Other companies followed suit, adopting similar policies. FlightFare grew into an international platform, empowering travelers worldwide. As for Marcus, he never stopped pushing boundaries. He didn't just break barriers, he built new paths for others to follow. And the next time he boarded a flight, it wasn't just as a business-class passenger. It was as a man who had changed an entire industry, one flight at a time. The courtroom battle. Despite Atlas Skies Airlines agreeing to collaborate, Marcus knew their public apology wasn't enough to right the systemic wrongs that had affected thousands. Stories continued to pour in under the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack. The more he read, the clearer it became: this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. That's when Marcus's legal team suggested taking it to the next level: a class action lawsuit. Marcus, his attorney, Olivia Tran, said one evening during a late meeting at Novatech's headquarters, "We can't just stop at public pressure. If we want real change, we need to hit them where it hurts most: their policies and their pockets." Marcus leaned back, nodding. "Let's do it. But this isn't about a payout. It's about justice." Over the next few months, Marcus and his legal team gathered overwhelming evidence. Dozens of passengers came forward to share eerily similar experiences: denied upgrades, ticket cancellations without explanation, and targeted profiling. Some had even been removed from flights for reasons that were later proven unjustified. The case, Green vs. Atlas Skies Airlines, became one of the most high-profile discrimination lawsuits in recent history. News channels covered every detail, and the courtroom was packed with reporters every day. The turning point. The trial reached its dramatic peak when Marcus himself took the stand. His calm, measured testimony captivated the courtroom. He spoke not just about his own experience but about the broader implications: how unchecked bias in industries like travel affected millions of people every day. "I'm not just fighting for me," Marcus said, his voice steady but powerful. "I'm fighting for every person who's ever been told they don't belong. For every traveler who's been humiliated, questioned, or ignored simply because of the color of their skin. It's time for that to change." The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom a month later when the verdict was delivered. Atlas Skies was found guilty of systemic discrimination. They were ordered to pay a hefty settlement, not just to Marcus, but to a fund dedicated to promoting racial equity in the travel industry. The airline was also forced to implement mandatory diversity training, transparent accountability measures, and a new policy board with independent oversight. FlightFare takes off. Meanwhile, FlightFare was evolving into something far bigger than Marcus had ever imagined. What started as a simple review app became a global movement. The app introduced a Fair Skies rating system, ranking airlines based on customer experiences, inclusivity, and fair treatment. Airlines that scored poorly saw immediate consequences, reduced bookings, public scrutiny, and pressure to improve. Conversely, those that embraced transparency and fairness saw their reputations and profits soar. Partnerships followed quickly. Major travel agencies integrated FlightFare's data into their booking systems. Celebrities became ambassadors for the platform, sharing their own travel stories. The app even expanded into other sectors, helping users rate hotels, rental car companies, and cruise lines. The meeting that changed it all. One morning, Marcus was sitting in his office when his assistant knocked. "Marcus," she said, "there's someone here to see you. You're going to want to take this meeting." In walked a tall man with silver hair, none other than John Whitaker, the CEO of Horizon Airways, one of the world's largest airline conglomerates. Unlike Atlas Skies, Horizon had been watching Marcus's progress with admiration. "Marcus," Whitaker said, extending a hand. "I'll get right to it. We've seen what you've done with FlightFare, and we want to be the first airline to fully integrate your app into our operations. We're not just talking about ratings, we're talking about real-time monitoring, instant response teams for reported incidents, and transparency that's second to none." Marcus listened carefully, intrigued. "And what do you expect in return?" "Nothing but the chance to be better," Whitaker said. "We believe the future of travel should be fair, accessible, and inclusive for everyone. Help us lead the charge." A new era. The partnership between FlightFare and Horizon Airways set a new standard in the industry. Other airlines rushed to follow suit, knowing they'd be left behind if they didn't. Policies that once took years to change were rewritten in months. Passenger complaints were taken seriously, and airlines became more accountable than ever before. Marcus's journey had started with a simple business class ticket and an act of discrimination, but it ended with him reshaping an entire industry. He became a sought-after speaker, delivering powerful talks at global conferences about diversity, technology, and the power of standing up for what's right. But through it all, he remained grounded. One evening, as he boarded a Horizon Airways flight to London, the flight attendant greeted him with a warm smile. "Mr. Green, welcome aboard. Your usual seat is ready for you." Marcus smiled, nodding as he settled into his first-class seat, not because he needed the luxury, but because it symbolized something far bigger than comfort. It symbolized progress. As the plane soared into the sky, he looked out the window, thinking about how far he, and the world, had come. But he wasn't done yet. There were always more battles to fight, more barriers to break, and more skies to conquer. The global expansion. With FlightFare dominating the U.S. market, Marcus knew the time had come to go international. Discrimination and unfair treatment weren't confined to American airlines, similar stories were emerging from Europe, Asia, and beyond. His team launched FlightFare Global, a multilingual version of the app designed to empower travelers worldwide. They established regional offices in key cities like London, Tokyo, and Johannesburg, recruiting local advocates and experts to ensure cultural sensitivity and accurate reporting. Within 6 months, FlightFare Global had over 10 million active users. Airlines in Europe and Asia scrambled to meet the growing demand for transparency and fairness. Some resisted at first, but public pressure quickly forced them to adapt, or face a massive loss in business. And then, something unexpected happened. The backlash. Not everyone was happy with Marcus's success. Legacy airlines, those deeply rooted in old systems and resistant to change, began launching counterattacks. They funded smear campaigns, claiming FlightFare was biased and unfairly targeting certain companies. Anonymous articles appeared online, accusing Marcus of using his platform for personal gain. Fake reviews were planted in an attempt to manipulate FlightFare's rating system. Competitor apps suddenly emerged, offering alternative facts about airline experiences. One morning, while Marcus was reviewing reports in his San Francisco office, Olivia burst in. "You need to see this," she said, dropping a tablet on his desk. The screen showed a headline from a major news outlet. "FlightFare under fire. Is this really about fairness, or just revenge?" Marcus's jaw tightened as he scrolled through the article. It was full of half-truths and anonymous quotes from insiders. "Typical playbook," Marcus said, shaking his head. "If they can't beat us on facts, they'll try to undermine our credibility." Olivia crossed her arms. "What do we do?" Marcus grinned. "We do what we've always done. We prove them wrong, with facts, transparency, and results." The FlightFare Foundation. In response to the growing scrutiny, Marcus doubled down on his mission. He created the FlightFare Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to promoting equity, fairness, and diversity in global travel. The foundation funded independent research on airline practices, offering grants to universities and organizations studying discrimination in travel. It also partnered with international advocacy groups to provide legal support for travelers who faced unfair treatment. Marcus's next step was launching the Global Fair Travel Summit, an annual event bringing together industry leaders, activists, and tech innovators to discuss solutions for creating a more inclusive travel experience. The first summit, held in London, was a resounding success. Airlines that had once been hostile to FlightFare began sending representatives, eager to show their commitment to change. Among the keynote speakers was John Whitaker, the CEO of Horizon Airways, who praised Marcus's vision and urged other airlines to follow his lead. But the highlight of the event came when the United Nations announced that it would be adopting the FlightFare Fairness Index as a standard for evaluating travel-related discrimination worldwide. The audience erupted in applause. Marcus stood on stage, humbled and grateful. Hollywood comes calling. As Marcus's story continued to grow, it caught the attention of Hollywood producers. One evening, while Marcus was having dinner at a quiet cafe in Los Angeles, a man approached his table. "Mr. Green," the man said, extending a hand. "I'm David Landry, producer at Monarch Pictures. We've been following your journey, and we think your story deserves to be told on the big screen." Marcus chuckled. "A movie? I'm not sure the world needs a film about airline ratings." David smiled. "This isn't just about ratings. It's about courage, justice, and transformation. It's the kind of story that inspires people to stand up and fight for what's right." The more Marcus thought about it, the more he realized David was right. His story wasn't just about one man's fight against an airline. It was about resilience, innovation, and the power of one voice to spark a global movement. After months of negotiations, Flight to Change, the Marcus Green story went into production. It starred a rising Hollywood actor who captured Marcus's charisma and determination perfectly. When the film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, it received a standing ovation. Critics hailed it as powerful, inspiring, and a call to action. A lasting legacy. By the time Marcus was in his late 50s, FlightFare had become a household name. Airlines around the world had transformed their practices, and travelers everywhere were empowered to demand fair treatment. But Marcus's impact extended far beyond the travel industry. He became a symbol of what was possible when technology, advocacy, and passion intersected. One day, as he stood in the lobby of Novateca's headquarters, now a gleaming 40-story building in downtown San Francisco, a group of young entrepreneurs approached him. "Mr. Green," one of them said, holding out a business card, "we've been following your work for years. You've inspired us to launch our own app to fight bias in the hiring process. We'd love to get your advice. Marcus smiled, taking the card. I'd be happy to help, he said. Just remember, change doesn't come easy. But if you believe in what you're doing, nothing can stop you. As the young entrepreneurs walked away, Marcus looked out at the city's skyline. He thought back to that moment at JFK Airport when an airline agent had tried to deny him his rightful place. He smiled. That moment had been the spark that lit a revolution. And he was just getting started. A global humanitarian mission. As FlightFare became a global force, Marcus's influence extended far beyond the travel industry. World leaders began to take notice. His work with the FlightFare Foundation evolved into broader humanitarian efforts aimed at eradicating systemic discrimination in multiple sectors: housing, education, healthcare, and employment. The foundation launched Project Equity, a worldwide initiative to combat inequality on a global scale. Marcus personally traveled to dozens of countries, meeting with heads of state, corporate leaders, and activists. His ability to bring people together, combined with his tech-savvy approach to problem-solving, made him a global icon for change. Marcus was no longer just a successful tech entrepreneur, he had become a symbol of hope and transformation. The call to politics. The buzz began quietly at first, whispered in boardrooms and written about in political opinion pieces. Marcus Green for public office? It was an idea that gained momentum quickly. His supporters argued that someone with Marcus's experience, leadership, and global perspective was exactly what the world needed in a time of crisis. One afternoon, while Marcus was visiting a community center in Chicago, a young girl approached him. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. "Mr. Green," she said shyly, clutching a notebook. "Can you be president someday?" Marcus knelt down to her level, smiling. "Why do you ask?" "Because you help people," she said simply. "And I think presidents should help people." Her words stuck with him. Later that evening, Marcus sat in his office, reflecting on everything he'd accomplished, and everything still left to do. The next week, he made a bold announcement: he was running for office. Not for city council or governor. He was running for President of the United States. A campaign like no other. Marcus's presidential campaign was unlike anything the country had ever seen. It wasn't built on empty promises or divisive rhetoric, it was built on data, transparency, and people-powered solutions. He ran as an independent, rejecting the traditional party system that so often stifled innovation. His campaign slogan, "The future is fair." Marcus proposed bold, tech-driven policies to address long-standing issues. He focused on education reform, economic equity, healthcare access, and using technology to improve government transparency. His campaign rallies were electric, filled with people from all walks of life who believed in his vision for a better, fairer future. Celebrities, tech leaders, and grassroots activists all rallied behind him. But it wasn't just hype. Marcus had real solutions. He proposed the Equity Act, a comprehensive policy framework designed to level the playing field in everything from job hiring to public housing. His speeches were visionary. "This isn't about me. This is about us. It's about building a future where fairness isn't just a word we say, it's something we live every day, in every part of our lives. Together, we can create that future." The election night shocker. Election night was tense. The race had been close, with political analysts calling it one of the most unpredictable elections in history. As the results rolled in, it became clear Marcus had done the impossible. He had won. The nation watched as Marcus stood before a massive crowd in Washington, D.C., delivering his victory speech. Tears filled the eyes of people who had never believed they'd live to see a leader like him, a man who had fought for fairness in every aspect of his life, take the highest office in the land. "Tonight isn't the end of our journey," Marcus said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "It's the beginning of something new. Something fair. Something better. For all of us. A vision for the future." Marcus's presidency was transformative. He brought tech-driven solutions to the forefront of governance, using data to tackle issues in real time. His administration launched initiatives to close the digital divide, ensure universal access to education and healthcare, and create job opportunities for underrepresented communities. He formed the Global Fairness Coalition, bringing together nations to work on eradicating inequality and improving transparency worldwide. But Marcus's most ambitious project came during his second term, the Fair Skies Initiative, a joint partnership between nations and private companies to create the world's first truly inclusive space program. The next frontier, space. Inspired by the desire to ensure that humanity's next steps into space were driven by fairness and opportunity, Marcus spearheaded a project to build an international space station, one dedicated not just to scientific research but to fostering global collaboration and peace. "The future isn't just here on Earth," Marcus said during the initiative's announcement. "It's out there, among the stars. And we must ensure that when we reach for the heavens, we do it together, leaving no one behind." The project attracted some of the greatest minds in science and technology. Young people from underrepresented communities who had never dreamed of becoming astronauts now had a path to the stars. Years later, when the first multinational crew, including scientists from countries that had never participated in space exploration, launched into orbit aboard the Unity 1, Marcus stood at mission control, watching with pride. He had taken his fight for fairness from the skies of Earth to the skies beyond. A legacy written in the stars. Marcus's journey, from a denied business class seat to a global leader and space pioneer, became the stuff of legend. His story inspired generations to stand up for what they believed in, to fight for fairness, and to dream bigger than anyone thought possible. Long after his presidency ended, people continued to speak of him not just as a leader but as a symbol of hope. And when a new starship was christened the Green Voyager, destined for the farthest reaches of space, it was a fitting tribute. Marcus Green's legacy wasn't just written in the history books. It was written in the stars. The final frontier. Years after stepping down from the presidency, Marcus found himself standing at the edge of history once again. He was 68 years old, with salt and pepper hair and the same steady fire in his eyes that had carried him through every challenge. This time, though, he wasn't leading a boardroom, a nation, or even a global summit. He was suiting up for one last mission. The Green Voyager, the state-of-the-art starship bearing his name, was preparing for its maiden voyage to a distant colony on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. It was the culmination of decades of work, an international project that symbolized everything Marcus had fought for: fairness, unity, and the boundless potential of humankind. As he stood in front of the ship, surrounded by world leaders, scientists, and a new generation of dreamers, Marcus took a deep breath. "When we started this journey, we couldn't have imagined where it would take us. But we knew one thing: fairness, justice, and opportunity are universal truths. They're not just for the privileged few, they're for everyone. If we carry that belief with us, no matter how far we go, we'll always find our way." The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus shook hands, gave a final wave, and stepped aboard the Green Voyager. For the next 6 months, the world followed the mission's every move. Updates from the ship became global events, and Marcus's steady voice, broadcast from millions of miles away, continued to inspire. His calm wisdom brought comfort, even from the depths of space. And then, one day, the transmissions stopped. The ship had reached its destination. The last words the world heard from Marcus were simple but powerful. "We've made it. The future is here." It's beautiful. A legacy beyond time. Back on Earth, Marcus's memory lived on, not just in the monuments bearing his name or the history books that celebrated his achievements, but in the everyday lives of the people he had touched. Children from every corner of the world knew his story by heart, how one man's refusal to accept injustice sparked a revolution. How a business-class seat denial transformed into a movement for global fairness. Airlines had changed. Governments had changed. The very way people dreamed about the future had changed, because of Marcus Green. Generations later, travelers looked up at the stars and whispered his name. His story became a legend, told around campfires on Earth and in outposts on distant moons. In the vastness of space, there was always a reminder: fairness, like exploration, has no limits. Conclusion: the light he left behind. In the end, Marcus Green was more than a pioneer, a president, or a hero. He was proof that one act of courage could change the course of history. That fairness was worth fighting for, no matter how long it took. And that sometimes, the smallest moments, the ones where someone tells you no, you don't belong here, can ignite the biggest movements. Because true greatness isn't about where you start. It's about how far you're willing to go, and who you lift up along the way. Marcus went farther than anyone ever imagined. And his light will never fade.